Hey everyone, Callum from Cagefront here. Welcome back to the channel. And if you are new here, welcome to the channel. Now, I really hope you guys have been having a very good holiday period. And if you do celebrate Christmas, I hope you had a very nice Christmas as well. Now, this is going to be the last video of 2024 on this channel. And I want to go out with a bang. And I don't think there is any better way to do it than by doing a tier list ranking every single card in 2024's calendar year, starting from Ankalaev versus Walker 2 fight night all the way through to Colby Covington versus Joaquin Buckley. And I want to include the fight nights on this card because I've seen other videos where it's just the pay-per-views, but I want to include the fight nights as well because this year there have really been some amazing fight nights that some of them have actually been better than the pay-per-views anyway. So when we look at judging criteria for this video, I'll be judging this on the popular fights within the cards, how stacked they are with the names that they have, how consistently they perform from the prelims, whether they have really good knockout submissions, you know, consistent finishes on the cards. That'll grade them higher as well. And when it comes to the tiers themselves, we've got S tier, which is take my money. Absolute god tier card. You cannot miss that card. Could not miss it to save my life. A is great card. So not completely the best of all time, but very, very good card. You walk away extremely satisfied. B, which is decent, kind of middle of the road-ish. It's not like you're, missing out on the best thing, but you watch it and you think, oh, it's actually pretty good. C is where we're looking at pretty mid. It's kind of just borderline whatever. You could miss it, to be honest. It didn't have the best outcomes. And D is I would rather watch Jake Paul versus Mike Tyson with a shit Netflix stream, which basically obviously means the card wasn't that great. So without further ado, with all that explanation done, let's get into the tier list. And here is the tier list. As you can now see on your screen, we have Take My Money, we have great card, decent, pretty mid, and worst of all, rather watch Jake Paul. And some of these, I can tell you, will be put in that position. So without further ado, let's get into the first fight card, which is going to be Ankalaev and Walker, the first fight night of the calendar year of 2024. Now, this one was not too bad, actually, to be fair. There was a fair few knockouts on this card, and it was from pretty notable fighters as well. We had Joshua Van, who was performing very well. We had Gene Silva coming through, who was very, very good against Weston Wilson. Took him out with ease. Marcus McGee as well, I guess, against Gaston Balanos. And Ankalaev obviously chinning Johnny Walker, which is pretty normal these days, unfortunately, but he had a very brutal finish, broke his nose and everything. So I got to put this to kick off, got to put it in the decent category, to be honest. Now, moving up, we got the first pay-per-view card, which is UFC 297. Now, UFC 297, I think it was probably one of the weaker pay-per-view cards, to be honest. It was filled with Canadians. It was obviously placed in Canada, and the Canadian men had an absolute fucking hooner. They pretty much all lost. The only ones that won were the women, and that in particular was for Jasmine Jasudavicius. Jasmine Jasudavicius absolutely murdered Priscilla Cachoeira in that card. I mean, she had landed something ridiculous, like over 200 strikes on her. There was a lot of blood, and she got the finish, and honestly, she just stole the show from all the Canadian guys, like Mike Malott, like Marc-Andre Barrios. Any of them, they completely got taken over by her. She is literally spearheading Canada at this point. And ultimately, I'd say it was decent. I would probably put it above Ankalaev and Walker, just because you did have some decent fights on that card. I mean, you had Strickland and Duplessis, which was pretty much better than most of those fights that were on that fight night of Ankalaev and Walker. Strickland and Duplessis, obviously a lot of blood, a lot of damage, and it was very, very neck and neck for that split decision. So I'm going to put it just above Ankalaev and Walker. Now, moving on to Dolidze and Imavov. This one is going in rather watch Jake Paul, to be honest. This one was not good. I mean, to be honest, looking through the card, nothing great happened in this card. So yeah, nothing to really say about this one. Now, Hermansson versus Pfeiffer. This one, not really anything super notable. We did have Carlos Pratez's KO debut against Trevin Giles with the straight left straight down the pipe, which was very satisfying to watch. And also, speaking of satisfying, Jack Hermansson being the underdog, 3-1 dog, taking out Joe Pfeiffer. That was a nice betting day for me. So I'm gonna put that one in pretty mid. I don't think it's good enough to be on the same level as the other two above it. Just didn't have enough quantity and quality within that to really make it go any higher. Now, UFC 298, Volkanovski versus Topuria. This one definitely a sore spot for me because obviously I'm Australian. Volkanovski's the GOAT for me, and he got chinned very badly, worse than when Islam chinned him. And on this card, honestly, even though that happened, regardless, it was a very, very good card. I mean, we had consistent finishes. We had Danny Barlow finishing. We had Zhang Ming Yang coming through and having a very good performance against Brenton Ribeiro. And we also had very good performances from Merab Dvalishvili, taking out Henry Cejudo. And we also had Robert Whittaker having a very, very good fight with Paulo Costa. Definitely one of the best fights of the first half of 2024. So this one for me got to go in great card slot. Now, Moreno versus Royval 2. This was honestly a very neat fight night. I think it was very good because we did have a bit of a Mexican side of Brandon Moreno and Yair Rodriguez both fighting. Obviously didn't go either of their ways, so we got both the upsets from Royval and Brian Ortega. Brian Ortega obviously coming back after a long layoff, had gone through a lot of personal stuff and everything, and it was good seeing him back and coming back into the win column as well. But I will say, not only that, there were really good consistent fights all the way through the card as well. So I'm going to put this in great card. I think it was honestly a very, very good card. Now moving on to Rosenstruik versus Gaziv. Now this one, we did have some pretty decent fights that really carried this. We had Vinicius Oliveira coming through, finishing Sopai in this card, which is one of the best finishes of the whole entire calendar year. You have to check that one out if you haven't. And we had Steve Urseg on there as well. I believe he took out Matt Schnell on that card, absolutely chinned him. And a lot of those performances really shot this one up for me. So I'm going to put this in decent. Now, UFC 299. O'Malley, versus Vera 2. This was an amazing card, honestly. We got O'Malley just putting on a striking showcase against Marlon Vera, and they both had history, which was really good to see. And yeah, O'Malley just dog walked him. Dustin Poirier as well, especially the underdog win against Benoit Saint Denis, with Benoit coming up as this boogeyman in lightweight, and Dustin just absolutely cleans him up. Absolutely fantastic from Poirier. Striking masterclasses from both of them, those guys. We had Michael Venom Page's debut as well, which is definitely a thing that obviously picks this up in terms of the rankings. And we did have Robles to Spain as well on this card when we thought he was good, and he just absolutely ran through his opponent. And then we also had Petr Yan's come back into the win column against Song Yadong, and we had JDM having a very good performance against Gilbert Burns. Gilbert Burns obviously losing the first two rounds. In the third round, gets the knee, times the knee, and absolutely destroys Gilbert Burns with ground and pound. So this, for me, it's got to be the first take my money card. Absolutely fantastic card. Now moving on, Tuivasa versus Tybura. Yeah, let's go the other end. This is rather watch Jake Paul. This, honestly, I'm putting it above Dolidze and Imavov because in that one, absolutely nothing happened. But in Tuivasa versus Tybura, that fight night, we did get Ange Lusa versus Brian Battle. We got that whole beef. That fight got called off, and then Brian Battle and Ange Lusa just going at each other in the cage, and that was pretty entertaining. But aside from that, there was literally nothing going for this card. So yeah, it belongs in rather watch Jake Paul, to be honest. Now, moving up to Hebus versus Namajunas, the fight night. This This was better than the last fight night, I will say. I mean, we did have some interesting moments in this card. We had Andre Lima against Igor Severino when Igor bit Andre Lima, and Andre Lima got a tattoo of the bite mark on his arm inside his bicep, and that definitely picks this up because it's so unique. And then we also got to see Yusuf Zalal come back, and also Peyton Talbot absolutely bullying Cameron Simon, and really being the first showing that Peyton Talbot is a serious contender. That was a scary performance from him. So this one, I've got to go probably at the bottom of decent with a lot of those things coming through. I think it's probably at the bottom of decent there. Now, Blanchfield versus Manon Fior. This one, not too strong at the bottom of the card where we're starting off, but I'd say Manon Fior just really showing that she's a very strong competitor for that title. I mean, 50-45ing Erin Blanchfield was extremely impressive. She was literally just ragdolling her and just outstriking her. It was not a good day for Erin, and comparatively, looking at Erin now beating Rose Namajunas, it's just showing how good Manon Fior is, and she is going to cause a lot of problems for Shevchenko in that title picture. And as well as that, we did have Joaquin Buckley showing out against Vicente Luque. Luque had absolutely no fight IQ in that fight, but he did show out and he did do well. And aside from that, there was like Nate Landwehr, who had a pretty good performance against Jamal Emmers, took him out, which was a pretty entertaining fight. So I probably put this probably at the top of pretty mid. I think it's edging on decent, but I think it was really lacking towards the early prelims, like that prelim side. There just really wasn't much going on. And moving on to Brendan Allen versus Chris Curtis 2. I'm going to say that this is probably like a pretty mid. I'd say actually maybe bottom of decent, to be honest. I think this was a decent main card. It did have like some good performances on there, and we had some good KOs as well, because we had Morgan Charrier, we had Chepe Mariscal, and we had Bahamondez's KO as well. And the main event between Allen and Curtis itself was very entertaining, going 5 rounds. Both of them were pretty gassed. I mean, Allen was hope shooting for his life, and Curtis just tore up his hamstring as well. So they really put a lot into that fight, and it was very entertaining coming in to the UFC 300 card. So I'll probably actually put it maybe around here, to be honest. I'd probably say there. Now, UFC 300. I don't know if there's really anything I need to say about this. It's just Stackometer is like 11 out of 10. Like, this is just going to the very top. This card was absolutely cracked. If you're starting with Cody Garbrandt and Davison Figueiredo as the very first fight of the card, I mean, come on. Like, fantastic performances. Holloway versus Gaethje, Pereira absolutely clowning on Jamal Hill. I mean, just a fantastic card, the most stacked card ever, pretty much ever made, period. I would say definitely in take my money. Come on. Now, Nicolau versus Perez. This was quite a step down. I'd probably say this is rather watch Jake Paul, to be honest. This was a very big step down, just a deflation from UFC 300. There really wasn't anything that happened. Obviously, Perez got a very nice KO against Nicolau, but aside from that, there really just isn't that much to remember. Now, UFC 301. This one, I think, is a super underrated card. I know a lot of people don't like this, because obviously we had the flyweight title fight to, as a main event, which I love flyweight, to be honest. I think it's great, but not only that, we had very good performances. We had Maurizio Hufi coming through with a masterclass in his debut against Jamie Malarkey. We had Michelle Pereira performing. We had Caio Borralho performing. And then obviously Pantoja performing very well against Urseg, and the return of Jose Aldo as well. So I got to put this right in great card, right behind UFC 298. It was a very underrated card, UFC 301. Now, Derek Lewis versus Rodrigo Nascimento. This was awesome. This was an awesome fight night. This has got to go in great card. I mean, amazing finishes and performances consistently throughout. We see Derek Lewis beating Nascimento, then taking his pants off and mooning pretty much the whole entire crowd. You cannot argue with that. And then we had in the co-main, we had Joaquin Buckley beating Nursultan Ruziboyev, who was definitely just like this boogeyman, this huge, tall boogeyman, and Buckley disposed of him pretty well. And then we had Carlos Olberg with a 12-second second KO over Alonzo Menafield. We had Chase Hooper absolutely destroying Vyacheslav Borshev. And we had bloody Esteban Ribovic head kicking Terrence McKinney's face off. So this, without it actually, to be honest, I think I might actually have to put that above 301. I think that is easily one of the best fight nights we got this year. It was an incredible, incredible card. Now, Edson Barbosa versus Lerone Murphy fight night. This one, a bit of a step down. Aside from the main event, which was pretty entertaining, pretty back and forth kickboxing based fight between Barbosa and Murphy, there really just wasn't anything there. So I'm probably got to put it around here. I don't think it was that impressive. It was pretty mid, to be honest. Now, moving up to UFC 302. This is going to be controversial because if you really look down the card of UFC 302, nothing really happened. There wasn't much going on. There wasn't anything really notable. There was only 3 finishes on this card. Not a single knockout. The 3 finishes were submissions as well. And I would probably honestly say the only thing that could potentially carry this was the main event between Makhachev and Poirier, because even Strickland and Paulo Costa, obviously Strickland dog-walked Paulo Costa, and there just wasn't enough aggression from Costa to really warrant it even being a good fight, because Strickland was just sparring him. Like, there really wasn't much to it there. So I've honestly, hot take, but I got to put this as like pretty mid. I'm probably put it at the top of pretty mid. Actually, no, to be honest, I'm going to put it here. I even think that the Blanchfield versus Fior card was better, to be honest. I just don't see that being that impressive. I think it was a pretty lackluster pay-per-view event, to be honest. Now, moving on to the fight night between Cannonier and Imavov. This one, I'm going to say, was probably the best out of what we've got so far in pretty mid. Like, the main event was very entertaining, good crowd. We had Dominic Reyes coming back in the win column, finishing Dustin Jacoby after like 4 straight finish losses, so it's just memorable in that sense as well. And we did have a good finish from Carlos Prates. We had the Raul Rosas Jr. performance as well against Ricky Tercios as well. I mean, there were some very good moments in that card when you look down at, and some pretty memorable ones anyway, so I'm gonna put it there. I think that's fair that it goes there. Now, fight night Perez versus Tyra. Aside from Garrett Armfield and Brady Heastand having an absolute war, which I highly recommend you check that out, there pretty much wasn't much on this card. The main event completely blew out because Perez got injured in the main event, did his ACL, I believe. So yeah, this one, honestly, probably here. Probably not very good. Definitely rather watch Jake Paul than watch that, to be honest. There just was not anything going on. Now, moving up to a better one. Robert Whittaker versus Ikram Aliskerov. Now, this is oil money coming through and delivering, because even though they lost Hamzat Chimaev, Whittaker and Aliskerov delivered, because Whittaker just absolutely bulldozed Aliskerov, cleaned him up with an uppercut, head kick, everything just beautiful. And not only that, we had Alexander Volkov shock the world, beating Pavlovich, because Pavlovich, aside from losing to Tom Aspinall, was killing absolutely everyone. And then we also had Johnny Walker getting folded like a lawn chair against Volkan Oezdemir. We had Shara Bullet getting a very nice finish in that fight. And then who else did we have? We had Felipe Lima's debut. So he just fought on the Joaquin Buckley fight card. He took out Naimov in this one, and he is looking incredible. We had Nasrat Hakparas having a very good performance against Jared Gordon as well. This one looked fantastic. Honestly, I'm probably going to put it about here. Oh, these are neck and neck. These are neck and neck. It's really hard to say. No wrong answer there, to be honest. Both fantastic fight nights. Now, International Fight Week, UFC 303, Pereira versus Yuri 2. This one, as an International Fight Week, I think it's a little bit overrated. Obviously, we had Pereira and Yuri on short notice, which we had already seen them fight before. Yuri got absolutely dominated, and then he's just got dominated even worse again. And this would have been so much better, I mean, if we got Conor McGregor and Chandler on it, main eventing it. But obviously, classic Conor McNuggets recently, he is just shitting the bed with absolutely everything. And aside from that, we did have some good things down the spine of the card. We did have Ige versus Lopez. Both of them saving the card with them themselves. I mean, Ige coming in on like 4 hours notice, Lopez performing very well at having to weigh in like 3 different times, and then we had MVP versus Ian Gary, which was good. We had Gene Silva, we had Peyton Talbot, we had Joe Pyfer, we had all brutal KOs from all of them. So those really more so carry the card than even the main event. So this one, I've got to say, especially with those KOs in there as well, probably got to put this about here. I think International Fight Week, if we take out Pereira and Prohatska and we put in Conor McGregor and Chandler, and that delivers, this could easily be like in the top of the great card, to be honest. But yeah, I'm gonna put it there. I think around the mid great card tier is where it should go. Now, looking at Namajunas versus Cortez's fight night, this one didn't really deliver aside from Gene Silva against Drew Dober. That was an incredible fight. Gene Silva just showing that he can move up a weight class and absolutely dominate. It had Drew Dober an absolute bloody mess. And then we also had down the card, we had Charles Johnson beating Joshua Van with a brutal uppercut after arguably losing the first 2 rounds in that fight, and then coming back and taking Van out, with Van having a lot of momentum on his side as well. So it was pretty decent for what it was. I'm gonna say this will probably go around here. I think it was in pretty mid, but yeah, I just don't think there's enough strength within it. You know, the main card blew, the main event blew, like we only had 2 really decent fights out of 12 to 13 fights. It's just not strong enough to put anywhere above pretty mid. Now, looking at Amanda Lemos versus Jandiroba, this one obviously you can tell from the fight night and the main event, this is probably the weakest singular main event that we have, but ultimately on paper it should be in Rather Watch Jake Paul, but I'm not putting it there because of the performances that were on it. We had Haider Emil versus Jean Yong Lee, which was just like 110% miles per hour, like just crazy speed in those striking exchanges, and Haider Emil obviously got the win there, but it was a crazy fight. Like, what I can say can't do it justice. Definitely go watch that fight. We had Bruno Silva versus Cody Durden, which was a very back and forth fight, very seesaw based fight, with Bruno Silva taking Cody Durden out for the first time in his career. And we had Steve Garcia taking out Choi as well. Steve Garcia is on an extremely good run at the moment, just a KO freak. And with that, I've got to probably put this, honestly, probably about here. Maybe here, to be honest. I'd probably put it above about here. I mean, seriously, like the spine of the card really did that card justice. I mean, ignoring the main event, even the main event itself actually wasn't bad. I mean, it really showed that Jandiroba has a severe submission threat and is a threat to Wei Lee and that title. Now, moving on to UFC 304. 304, it's a tricky one because the UK was supposed to really show out, but they really got fucked over by the time zones, completely skewed. They had to fight at a completely different time to whenever they're naturally fighting, and like they have basically having to fight at 5 a.m. The card was just really skewed against English-based fighters. And look, even with that, comparatively, I mean, looking at Bilal Muhammad getting the win against Leon Edwards in his home country, and being the most hated fighter literally in the world at the moment. Bilal has just gotten the last laugh. I mean, he's gotten the title, and then we've got Aspinall. He beat Blades in the rematch, so it was a good storyline fight there. We had Paddy Pimblett taking out Bobby Green and getting a ranking position, which was very important. And we had Molly McCann, the Can, losing again to Bruno Silva. So this one, I'm gonna put this top of decent. I think it's better than UFC 297, but there were some inconsistencies down the card in terms of having good performances. There were some pretty lackluster ones, but then obviously higher up in that main card, it really did deliver more so, but I don't think I want to put it in great card, to be honest. Now, this was probably the most anticipated fight night for me of this whole year. Corey Sandhagen versus Umar Nurmagomedov. This was pretty good. I mean, we had Figueiredo fighting Marlon Vera and being the first person to drop Marlon Vera. And then we had Shara Bullet in this card. He was back in action, performed very well, obviously, hasn't lost yet. And there were a fair few finishes on this card as well. We had some gems in there too. We had Joel Alvarez fighting Elvis Brenner, which was an incredibly fast-paced fight. And the main event itself between Corey Sandhagen and Umar was an extremely technical one. Really brought a lot out of Umar that we hadn't seen before. And obviously Corey's just a dog. He's a legend. I mean, he tested himself when he didn't need to and made the fight card great. So honestly, I'm going to put this, for me, I think I'm going to put it here. I think it's probably in that position. I liked it better than UFC 303 ultimately. It was a very good fight night. Now, moving on to Tabora versus Spivak 2. This one just didn't really deliver, to be honest. I didn't see really much from it. I mean, Danny Barlow and Janata Denise, who were on this card that really could have picked it up in terms of KO threats, both of them did not get finishes in this card. Just not a good card overall. I mean, to be fair, the only performance that I actually liked was from Stephanie Luciano, who was one of the girls literally at the very first fight of this card. She looks promising in that division, so I'm very keen to see more of her. But aside from that, yeah, this card did stink. So I'm probably going to have to put this probably here, honestly, rather watch Jake Paul. Now, moving into UFC 305 at Perth, Dricus du Plessis versus Israel Adesanya. This one was a great card, but it was a bit slow in the middle of the card. Just aside, pretty much it was slow in the middle up until we got Carlos Prates taking out Li Jingliang. Then it really picked up from there. So the main card, especially leaping off that, was, I mean, we had Dan Hooker versus Gamrot in an absolute war. That was an awesome fight. We had Kai Kara France taking out Urseg brutally as an underdog. And the main event between DDP and Israel Adesanya definitely didn't disappoint. There was a lot of back and forth, and DDP did a fantastic job of getting that choke in that fight. So I'm going to be putting this one probably... This is tricky. I think this was a very good card, to be honest. I think I'm going to have to put it here. I think it's definitely in that great card position. I just don't know if it beats... Ooh. No, I'm going to put it here. I think it was that good a card. I think the main card just delivered so well, to be honest. No Australian bias here. I just definitely think the card definitely did deliver there. Now, Cannonier versus KO Baralho. This one was definitely one of the better fight nights, especially coming off a pay-per-view card. This was definitely good. I mean, we had Wang Kong, who kicked off the card with an absolutely brutal KO, and we had Tough 32, the finales of that Tough series, back-to-back KOs, which were very, very nice finishes as well. And we had Michael Morales on that card as well, fighting Neil Magny and extending his undefeated record to, I believe, 17-0. So this one was definitely good. I'm going to put this in the low A category, the low great card category. Now, looking at Gilbert Burns versus Sean Brady for their fight night. This one, I think this was like it's a bit of like a whatever, kind of like a weird kind of fight. I think it's definitely the middle of the range. I just don't really see that there was much that really happened in that card. There was nice technical transitions from Burns and Brady in their fight themselves specifically. But aside from that, I mean, we had Steve Garcia KO Kyle Nelson. But other than that, there's not really much that I can really think off the top of my head that it was that fantastic. So I'm probably going to put this in pretty mid. I think this was probably about here, to be honest. Actually, I think here. I think 302. I think you got to give 302 a little bit of justice there, but with that main event. But yeah, I'd probably put it around pretty mid, to be honest. Now, moving on from that, the Sphere. The Sphere. Very, very unique spectacle, and this has got to go in A. That ad is really pissing me off. This one's got to go in A. I'm going to put it behind UFC 300. For this, I'm probably going to put it below 299 as well, just for me personally. I think 299 was just a really special card in terms of overall consistency. But when it comes to the Sphere, obviously a spectacle, very unique spectacle of an event. Wasn't the greatest on paper. was a very small card as well, about 10 to 11 fights, but there were very good performances on the card. We had Joshua Van fighting Edgar Chairez, which was extremely back and forth, one of the best fights of the year. We had Ode Osborne and Rodriguez completely showing out, shutting a lot of fans up, saying that, you know, these flyweights should definitely not be on the main card. It's ruining everything. They were honestly one of the best fights on the main card. And then we had Zellhuber versus Esteban Ribovic, which is without a doubt arguably the best fight of the year, and it's pretty hard to catch it, to be honest. They delivered massively and saved this card, because the main event and the co-main event between O'Malley and Merab, and then Alexa and Shevchenko, was pretty lackluster. So I'm putting it at the end of Take My Money. Now, moving on to a great fight night that came straight after a pay-per-view event. I mean, in France, Moicano versus Saint Denis. This was fantastic from the matchmakers, honestly. Delivering well after that Sphere event, showing that consistency. I mean, it started off a little bit slow at the start of the card, but when Fares Ziam came in and knocked out bloody Matt Frivola that brutally with that knee, I mean, it picked up from there. We had Morgan Charrier performing extremely well. We had the French favorite Brian Battle getting all the love from the fans, sticking the fucking birds up to everyone after he absolutely picked apart Kevin Jousset. Cannot take it away from him there. And then Moicano having the absolute best performance of his whole entire life in that one. So this, for me, this has got to go, honestly, this has probably got to go like up here. I think this has got to go like the best fight night so far that I can see, to be honest. Now, moving on to UFC 307. UFC 307, this was a good card in terms of having Alex Pereira and Khalil Rountree being one of the Fight of the Year contenders. But aside from that and Buckley beating Wonderboy in that, the card was not that great. It did fall pretty short. I didn't really see anything that was that notable. And I would probably put this, honestly, probably indecent, just above Allen versus Curtis. Well, actually, probably above Rosenstruck and Gaziv. I'd probably put it about there. It wasn't a bad card, don't get me wrong. And I mean, if you didn't have Pereira and Rountree and Buckley and Wonderboy, this card would probably be in like low, pretty mid, because there just wasn't much going on at all. Now, moving on, Royval versus Tyra. This was an underrated card. I do think that this was underrated. I mean, Royval versus Tyra was one of the best fights of the year for me personally. Just the technical ability and the back and forth and just the pure display of MMA in that fight was fantastic. And we also had some small gems in there. We had the debut of Ramazan Tamirov in that card, which was just brutal. He just destroyed CJ Vergara. And we had Grant Dawson as well, having a very nice KO, which he never usually gets. So it's one to remember as well. So I'm going to put this one probably higher up in the B column. I'm going to put this in higher up of decent. I want to put this about here. I think it was a pretty good card, to be honest. Now, moving on to Hernandez versus Pereira. Anthony Hernandez versus Michel Pereira. This one I honestly thought would deliver a little bit better than it did. There was only specific few things that really did deliver well. I didn't think the main event would be so one-sided, to be honest. I mean, Hernandez just absolutely destroyed Pereira and just cut off all his hype. But I will say, it was pretty weak overall with everything, but the Gene Matsumoto versus Brad Katona fight kept this one alive without a doubt. I think without that fight, it would be definitely pretty mid, but I think with those performances, I'd probably have to put it at the end of decent. I'd honestly say, like, seriously, watch the Gene Matsumoto versus Brad Katona fight. That one still sticks out to me clear as day because it was such an amazing fight. Now, UFC 308, this is going right here. This sucked. Absolutely sucked. No oil money whatsoever. This obviously was right up there. This was right here, right at the top. This was fantastic. Arguably the greatest card of the year. Very neck and neck with UFC 300. I mean, literally oil money in full effect. The card was ridiculously stacked. I mean, we obviously had Ilya versus Max Holloway. Ilya coming through with the amazing KO, one of the best KOs you could ever get against Max Holloway, who is known as one of the most, if not the most durable fighter in the whole entire of MMA statistically. And then we had Khamzat Chimaev getting it done brutally over Robert Whittaker, snapping all his front teeth. We had Lerone Murphy versus Ige, which was a very fun fight, very fun back and forth fight. Obviously, Lerone Murphy won. He got dropped early by Ige. He just really, you know, showed that determination. He's come through, so I'm keen to see him in the top 10. And then we had Sharabullets, KO of the year contender, the creativity of the double spinning back fist against Petrosian. I mean, it was a beautiful, beautiful finish. We had Ibo Aslan as well, 51-second finish in that fight. So matchmakers, Dana White did a fantastic job of moving that from like the second fight on the card, moving it up to the feature prelim, because that was entertaining for as long as it lasted. But to top that off as well, we had Mateusz Rebecki versus Miktabek Oralby as one of the fights of the year as well. That was extremely back and forth. Both of them had swollen eyes. I mean, the blood, there was blood absolutely everywhere. I mean, just a fantastic fight, fantastic card. That, take my money every day of the week. That is arguably better than UFC 300. It's really up for debate, but I'm leaving 300 as that spectacle at the top there, possibly just for now. But let's move on to the fight night between Moreno versus El Bazi. Now, this one, it was a pretty decent little card. You know, it was in Canada, it was in Edmonton. It did show out pretty well. And I do think it was better than your UFC 302s, your UFC 297s as well. I mean, you had Moreno coming back as a fan favorite, coming back better than ever, beating Amir El Bazi. And then we had Jasuda Vicious performing again, being the spearhead of Canada and not Mike Malott. Jasmine is literally just spearheading Canada at this point, and she really entertained in that fight. And we had Erin Blanchfield versus Rose Namajunas, which is a pretty competitive fight, which Erin Blanchfield really picked up in those later rounds and got the win there. So this one, I'm probably going to have to put this probably around here. I think it was pretty decent. I probably wouldn't say it was better. It was like a spectacle than Allen versus Curtis in terms of the performances that were on that card. So I'm gonna put it there in decent. Now, Magny versus Prates fight night. This was one of the best fight nights without a doubt in this calendar year. 8 out of 11 fights were finishes. We had Prates obviously topping off the card, showing out, absolutely annihilating Neil Magny. At the start of the card, we had 5 finishes in a row. And as well as that, we had Gaston Bolaños versus Romius Cortavius, or Cortavius Romius, perform extremely well. They had a very entertaining back and forth fight, just an amazing fight. And as well as that, we had Renier de Ritter have his debut, had a very good performance. I mean, there was just very good consistency, clear finishes. There was good just entertainment value through the whole entire card from start to finish. I think this one, honestly, this has got to go in a great card, but I think I've got to put it as the best one so far in terms of the fight night events. I'm honest, actually, to be honest, I'm going to put this above 305. I think it was that good. It was an amazing, amazing event. I really, really enjoyed it personally. And just remember, this is all opinionated, guys. So obviously, not everyone is going to be the same. You guys will not be the same as me. This is just how I felt when it came to these cards personally. Now, moving on to UFC 309. This card was pretty decent. I mean, we did have some good performances, very notable moments as well. Obviously, we had John Jones on the mic. We had Stipe Miocic retiring, but I would say in terms of the quality of the finishes and everything, I don't think it was the best one. I mean, John Jones did get it done. He had a very nice finish there, but it's against an old Stipe Miocic. Charles and Chandler some fucking how went to a decision. Don't know how that happened, but very entertaining. Both those guys entertaining as always. We had Oban Elliott at the start of the card with one of the best finishes against Basil Hafez. We had Jim Miller showing he still got it, choking out Damon Jackson, and we had Mauricio Hufi putting on a great performance against Lontop as well. So it was good, but the ones that I picked out, aside from that, everything else was pretty dust. So this, I'm gonna put it probably, oh man, this is tricky. I'm gonna put this probably here. I think I did like, no, I'll probably put it above 301. I think it's actually and above 303. I think it's got to go there. I think that's perfect position for it. Don't think I liked it as much as those Stringer Fight Nights. Definitely not. 305, 298, no. Better than 303, and yeah, I think that's the right position to put it in. Now moving on to Petr Yan versus Davison Figueiredo. This fight specifically, if you haven't watched my matchups to make video on the fights that I want in every division, Petr Yan and Figueiredo was the one that I wanted, and it literally got announced pretty much like a week after I did that video, and man, am I happy that got made, because just the technical masterclass from Petr Yan was insane. I mean, he looked as prime could get. It was so entertaining, and not only with that main event, I mean, China did show out very well. We had Zhao Long perform extremely well, beating Quang Li, taking him out. First time he's ever been finished. Zhao Long is a problem. The guy is nuts, but he is a problem. Definitely keep an eye out for him. And then Little Shi Ming absolutely decapitating bloody Feng Zhaocan with a devastating KO of the year contender with that head kick, sending her out in a stretcher, getting updates every single fight that went on. I mean, just in terms of memories, they are being made in this. I mean, Zhang Mingyang as well, coming through as without a doubt the dark horse of the division in the light heavyweight division. Just absolutely brutal finish from him. And then we even had Wang Kong on the other end getting absolutely exposed. And we also had Salikov, Muslim Salikov, a 40-year-old guy, throwing a heel kick like he's 20 years old and knocking out Song Kanan. This was filled to the brim with awesome stuff. Honestly, this is neck and neck with being the best fight night between these two. It's very hard to call. Honestly, just count these as basically being on the same level. It's so hard to call these. They were both absolutely fantastic. Now, moving on to the last pay-per-view of the year. We had Alexandre Pantoja versus Kai Asakura, which Pantoja absolutely showed out. I mean, man, the guy is going to be a flyweight champion for the next calendar year, I can tell you that. And I have said that in my previous video. If you haven't seen that already, it's predicting these champions that are going to be at the end of 2025. I'll leave that in the description below. But when it comes to this card, it started off very well. We had Kennedy Nzechukwu and Chase Hooper both getting finishes very quickly and dominantly. We had Josh Van versus Cody Durden. They both looked great in that fight. I mean, especially Josh Van. Durden had the heart, but Josh Van with just the box and the technical boxing, he has had a very good year. Very good year. Looked impressive, especially from what's happened coming off that Charles Johnson loss. He's looked great. Moving up, we had Evloev versus Sterling, with the constant grappling action, which was an absolute crime that was on the prelims. With the grappling like that, should have been on the main card. And then we had Doo-Ho Choi and Bryce Mitchell coming back better than ever, performing extremely well. Bryce Mitchell getting the first KO of his professional career. And then we had Shavkat and Ian Gary testing each other very well. It was a fairly entertaining fight. It wasn't the best. It was very slow at the start, but definitely exposing things that from each other that we hadn't seen before. And then obviously, leading up to that, Pantoja just showing why he's one of the best champions at the moment and why he's one of the most solidified, just honestly goats at this point in time. To be honest, he is fantastic. So this card was very strong throughout. I think I got to put this 310 probably. I think behind these guys. I think probably here. I think 310 was very good, very entertaining. Had a lot of good performances. But yeah, I don't think it's beating those Stringer Fight Nights as well. Now, the last card of the year, Colby Covington versus Joaquin Buckley. This was honestly actually very good. It was a slow start, but to finish off 2024, the calendar year, leading into the Felipe Lima performance against Miles Johns, fantastic, and Sean Woodson then performed, and then Joel Alvarez had an amazing performance. So we're getting that string of consistency and really showing that there's going to be new talent at the top of these divisions. And then looking at the old guard as well, moving through that, Michael Johnson with a beautiful KO against Otto Azaitar. I mean, he looked amazing. And then we had Daniel Marcos versus Adrian Yanez, which is a great back and forth scrap on the feet. Manel Cap, as insane he is, an absolute flow state fight for him. He looked like he was in the Matrix. We had Dustin Jacoby coming out, absolutely fucking Kamaru Usman versus Masvidal in Vitor Petrino. He's back in the win column, which is great to see. Cub Swanson as well, redeeming himself, absolutely destroying Billy Q in the co-main event. And also Joaquin Buckley to shut off the card, which was a little lackluster to obviously as the last fight, getting called off as a stoppage because of a cut. But man, Colby was bleeding absolutely everywhere and it was thick blood. So, you know, memories though, you got to say that, even though it wasn't the best in terms of an outcome, still thing to remember, and that scores points in this tier list. So this card, I've got to put this one probably around, probably here. I think lower of the great card. So we've got these, take my money. We've got 300, 308, 299, and 306. They're pretty fair there. Obviously, we've got 298 and a string of fight nights, as well as 305 in there as well. These fight nights were all absolutely fantastic. And then we've got a string of the UFC cards here, the pay-per-view cards, which were all very good. I mean, overall, you can see on this card, on this calendar year and this tier list, that I'm more so looking at most of these cards being very, very good. Realistically, we only have a couple that are in that pretty mid to rather watch Jake Paul, and pretty much all of these were fight nights, which was good because you do not want any of these bloody pay-per-views down in this section. And yeah, all these, even these here, weren't even that bad, to be honest. Like, they were somewhat entertaining. I mean, they did have their moments, like obviously with 302 you had Makhachev and Poirier, which did perform fairly well, and even like Cannonier and Imavov, they did perform well as well. But aside from, yeah, tell me what you think in the comments below. I'm very interested to hear what your picks would be, and I really hope you enjoyed this tier list video. And please like, comment, subscribe, and also check out the video on the screen if you want to see more MMA based content, and I will catch you in the next one.